Hello, everyone. So, I'll leave this question up for your reflection. I hope you keep it in mind during the presentation. What if the problem isn't too big, but our idea of impact is too small? When we think about impact, we think of something dramatic massive organizations, global summits, millions of dollars. But what if I told you it doesn't have to start there? What if I told you it can start somewhere much smaller? And more importantly, it can start with something you are really passionate about. When thinking about a problem, you shouldn't think about how it'll look on your resume or on your college applications. You should look for something that you're truly passionate about because social projects are hard. They require time, energy, and perseverance. And when you don't believe in what you're doing, it gets really easy to give up when it gets difficult. So, what is a social project? A social project is not charity, and I didn't understand that at first. When I started the Period Project, I thought I was just helping. I was helping girls and women who didn't have access to menstrual products or the proper education about their bodies. But soon I realized that charity is occasional. A social project is structured. It consists of a problem, a community willing to solve that problem, the solution that community devises, and consistency. For me, the problem was menstrual health. The community was our school, students, teachers, and parents. The solution was access, donating and making products permanently available in our bathrooms. And consistency meant making sure the project didn't disappear after just one donation drive. Some of the most important problems in our society are invisible menstrual poverty, food insecurity, education gaps, or mental health stigma. You don't really see them. No one that faces them can really announce them. No one raises their hand and says, I didn't come to school because I didn't have a pad. Silence protects problems. And when I started talking about menstruation in school, it was uncomfortable. People looked away, they laughed, and that discomfort told me exactly why my project mattered. Because if something is hard to say out loud, then it probably needs to be said. So, why do small projects matter? They matter because local action creates awareness. Awareness shifts culture, and culture influences policy. When I installed the product boxes in the bathrooms, it didn't feel revolutionary. It felt practical. But that small change meant something. It removed the embarrassment. It removed the need to ask. And it removed the shame of menstruation. Things that are practical but small are still meaningful and they lead to greater things. Because when you remove one barrier, you make space for someone else to move forward. Over time, I learned that every strong social project leans on four pillars. First, research, understanding before acting. Before I collected anything, I looked at data on menstruation and menstrual poverty in Brazil, and I saw how it connected to school absenteeism and inequality. Then, awareness. I wrote articles, I gave talks to parents and students alike, I made presentations. Third, access. I raised enough money to donate products to women and girls in need, and I installed the product boxes in our bathrooms. Then, sustainability, keeping it alive. I had to make sure the project kept on after all the excitement had faded. What surprised me most was that it wasn't just a school issue. My project actually aligned with real goals, such as quality education, gender equality, and reduced inequalities. These are goals discussed by the UN under the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And that showed me that local action can align with global priorities. And you don't have to be a politician at an international summit to create global change, even if you start small. A myth that stops many young people from starting to make a change is I'm too young. I don't have influence. I used to think that too, and it almost stopped me from starting to work. I almost didn't start because I thought I was unqualified. I was 13 in the 8th grade when I started this project. But strong social projects don't need popularity. They need one person's attention. The Period Project didn't start with funding. It started with a conversation and a plan. And it kept going because I was resilient, not because I was powerful. And that led to over 10,000 products donated to vulnerable women and girls. When you start a social project that you truly believe in, it doesn't just change your community, it changes you. Through the Period Project, I learned leadership. Not just theoretical leadership, but practical leadership. I learned how to communicate with administrators and propose solutions. I learned empathy, listening to stories of girls that weren't my own. I learned strategy, how to turn an uncomfortable issue like menstruation into a persuasive conversation so that people would want to hear me. And I learned resilience, because not every idea is going to work straight away. Yes, we donated thousands of products, but the real change didn't come from the number. It came from the beginning of a shift. When I first started talking about menstruation in school, it was uncomfortable, and to be honest, it's still not completely normal. But something has changed. Now, it's possible to talk about it. It's possible for me to be standing here before you. It's possible to ask questions. And that in itself may not seem extraordinary, but going from silence to conversation, even partial conversation, is progress. So how do you start? First, you identify a problem. But before you move forward, you need to identify a problem that you really care about. Because if you're starting a social project from external motivation, like grades, awards, applications, it's not going to work. You're not going to be as dedicated to it as if you have internal motivation, something within you that drives you to help people because you really care. Once you found that problem, you start to research. You start small. You measure your impact, and you slowly build partnerships. That is how you grow your project and you do something really meaningful. I didn't try to eradicate gender inequality. I focused on one barrier in one school. That made my project specific. Specific projects are realistic. Realistic projects survive, and surviving projects expand. I used to think that impact meant scale, but now I define it differently. To me, impact is reducing one barrier for someone else. If one girl doesn't miss school because a product was available, that's impact. If one conversation reduces stigma, that's impact. If one school goes from silence to openness, that is impact. So if you start small, you focus on one barrier, you focus on one issue that really matters, and you know you're going to help someone, that is impact. You don't need to save the world. You just need to refuse to ignore it. Thank you.